Good morning. Hello. Thank you very much for welcoming me here today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move on from Gill's presentation. The great news is that everything I'm saying dovetails and links beautifully with all of the great information you've received already this morning. But I'm going to look at it at a different level. I hope it's a different layer for you, some additive information. I'm going to look at employee engagement from the perspective of neuroscience. So understanding what's really happening in the brains of the people that we're looking to engage so that we can really understand some science that sits behind everything that Gill was talking about earlier this morning. So my name is Gill Mckay, as I say. We also have a booth and a stand outside. I'm here with my colleague Alistair Schofield. I only have a short period of time this morning to talk to you, but we'd be delighted to talk to you at our stand throughout the rest of the couple of days. And I hope to meet each and every one of you personally so that we can have that further conversation. So neuroscience, let's start talking about brains. And I think there's no better place to start than talking about where we actually came from. So the evolution of the human brain. So we do know, scientists know, that from an evolutionary perspective, we came from the Australopithecus. Very difficult to spell that word there. 4 million years ago, we share a gene that causes increased ability and length of the neurons. And we evolved over that 4 million years to become the human beings that we are today, the human beings that really are the superior species on Earth today. What we also know from anthropology and from fossil remains is that during that 4 million years, our skull sizes have increased threefold. And that has been to enable the growing brain that has turned us through evolutionary times into the human beings that we are today. And why am I telling you all of this? Well, the point is that the brains 4 million years ago that we developed from the Australopithecus, we were there to survive in a very predictable and stable environment. We lived in packs, we lived in small communities. And what that was all about was about survival. Our brains were there to make sure that we survived and we carried on with the species, we kept that species going, but really it was pretty predictable. We understood the seasons, we understood the weather, we understood how to forage for food and hunt for food, we understood how to keep that species going. Maybe there was a saber-toothed tiger here and there, a little bit of unpredictability, but we also learned how to deal with the saber-toothed tiger. 4 million years ago, even up to 10,000 years ago, 500 years ago, our brains were evolving for a very stable and predictable environment. Not this environment, the picture there of the Mumbai skyline, this technology-oriented, really busy, crazy, chaotic, fantastic world that we all work in now. This wonderful technology-based, overstimulated world. The point is, our brains have evolved for a predictable and stable environment, but not for this mad, overstimulated, fantastic, technology-based world that we all live in now. So in order to be able to operate, survive, prosper, be successful and thrive in this world, we have to take shortcuts. Our brains are limited from an evolutionary point of view, and we have to take shortcuts to do well in this world. What I want to show you is an optical illusion. You actually have a handout on your tables there. I hope we've handed them out to all of you to show you this optical illusion so I can show you these shortcuts that we actually take. Okay, so when I show you this, can you all see that there are some labels on some of the squares, A and B? Yeah, you can all see those. How many of you believe me when I say that squares A and B are the same color? Hands up. No hands there. So you all believe, therefore, that they aren't the same color? Are they different shades of grey? Yeah, hands out. You all believe they're different shades of grey. If you look at your handout, you will actually see an explanation. For in actual fact, they are the same shades of grey. This is an optical illusion. Our brain is taking shortcuts in order to give us information that actually they're not the same shade of grey. Let me explain what is happening. The first thing that our brain sees when we look at this optical illusion is a checkerboard. And we're seeing regularity. So our brain says, okay, there's regularity there. There are some pale grey colours and there are some dark grey colours. All the darks must be the same, all the lights must be the same. But as I start to cover it up, you can start to see that actually some of those colours might be different. And in fact, squares A and B, they are exactly the same colour, but because of the shadow cast, or the apparent shadow cast by the green cylinder, we believe them not to be the same. Let me cover it up from the other side. To be able to achieve that competitive advantage and be relevant and a global leader of the future with our engaged workforce, we are needing to be engaging in heuristic work. Heuristic work is about, we don't actually have the process. We're wanting to grab some ideas and innovation from you. We don't even know what the outcome is yet. And that's the challenge. Organizations are full of processes. They're full of algorithms. They're full of procedures and equations and ways to do things. The world of the successful organization of the future is about engaging employees into heuristics, the new world, innovation, creativity. The thing is, and Gill's figures back this up from the earlier presentation, organizations don't know how to make that transition. How do we move from the algorithmic work to the heuristic world? How do we engage those employees? Here is another definition of employee engagement from the CIPD, as the Chartered Institute of Professional Development in the UK. It talks to the same definition Gill gave before. It's about alignment, it's about passion, it's about values, it's about purpose, it's about energy. And so many organizations, we had a show of hands before, they engage in the whole topic of employee engagement by doing a survey. And what does a survey tell you? Well, most likely it tells you that your people are disengaged. The key is, what do you do with it afterwards? I add to what we were saying before. Employee engagement is not just about a survey. And by the way, if you come and talk to us at our stand, I can talk to you about brain-savvy employee engagement questions, doing it in a way that really links with the employee motivation. Employee engagement is about engaging hearts and minds, really understanding at a motivational level what's happening in the minds of your employees. And that's quite tough to do. It's quite tough to make that change, the move from the survey, the algorithm, to the heuristic world and the hearts and minds, engaging people in that regard. So here's a piece of a study that I want to talk to for the rest of my short session this morning. And it's a research, scientific study conducted at the University of Rochester in the United States by some scientists, Edward Dacey and Richard Ryan. They've done a huge amount of work into the area of motivation and engagement at work. In the algorithmic world, in the compliance, top-down management approach world, HR communities have done a lot of work around compensation plans, providing a way for people to want to work towards results and then they get compensated. Reward systems. There's something endemic in the culture around punishment. Ooh, if I do this wrong, I might be fired, or there might be a consequence. These are what we called, or what Dacey and Ryan call, extrinsic motivators. What I want to focus on today is those intrinsic, the human factors, the intrinsic motivators that we in HR, we as leaders, we in the wider community, need to be really thinking about in terms of our own personal engagement, but also the engagement of the teams that we lead. So these three broad titles I'm going to shine a light on and talk about for the next 15 minutes and give you some neuroscientific underpinning for them. They are of autonomy, and autonomy is about latitude, it's about freedom, it's about having the ability to engage in your work in the way that you know best, the way that's personally motivating for yourself. Competence. Competence isn't just about ability, our understanding of the English definition, if you like. Competence is about being excited. It's about the excitement of shining a light on your ability, the excitement of shining that light on your talents. And relatedness is about how do I connect to the purpose of the organization, to the purpose of the project, the work that I'm delivering. What's its big cause? Where is my energy and engagement to that? So these three areas coming out of scientific research are, my friends, the areas that we should be thinking about when we're looking to engage our employees. So let's start with autonomy first of all. And in each of these areas, I'm going to talk about some neuroscience that underpins it. Because neuroscience is a very interesting subject. And here we are in 2017 in this amazing world where we now know so much more about the brain than we did even 10, 15 years ago. But I do caution all of us, it's still in its infancy. We really don't understand everything about the brain, but we understand enough to be able to help us with our HR strategies, with our culture strategies, our organizational strategies, to help us plan and put great things in place. Technology, the wonderful fMRI scanning and more, has given us an insight into the functioning of the normal human brain. Whereas prior to that, we were taking inferences from autopsies, so cutting up dead bodies, or rats in labs, or extreme patients who've got extremely difficult conditions. So we're now at a place where neuroscience is accessible, and it's providing us as HR leaders with the evidence as to what we want to put in place, why it will work, and why it might not work. And what a great place to be. So let me just talk a little bit about the brain, and then we'll move to autonomy. Here's a lovely picture of the brain. The base part of the brain, which we evolutionary share with reptiles, is called the reptilian complex. In human beings now, it regulates our hunger, our oxygen levels, our temperature, etc. So we don't have to think about that. It's just happening. The next layer, the bit that overlays that part of the brain, the reptilian complex, is called the limbic system. Now, this is a really difficult area to research because it's bang in the middle of your head, right in the middle. What we do know is that this is the seat of our emotions. When we're making an emotional decision or when we're connected in any way with emotions, it's got the richest blood supply in the human body. You may also have heard of this part of the brain as being the mammal brain, the mammalian brain. What's different about mammals and reptiles is that mammals, they suckle on their mothers. They feed, they connect with their mothers. They stay with their mothers until they've learned how to survive. The emotional bond, the emotional connector. Then as we've evolved, we have the grey matter, which is called the neocortex, the overlay of the grey matter. Most importantly, what makes us separate as human beings is this piece called the frontal lobes, literally the bit at the front of the brain. The frontal lobes are required for forward thinking, for strategizing, for thinking about planning. And it's also about the frontal lobes. They also send information elsewhere in the brain. So they direct information to the right part of the brain to do something with it. We follow in our business the work of an eminent neuroscientist called Elkanan Goldberg, and he refers to the frontal lobes as like the conductor of the orchestra, the chief executive of the general of the army. And that's what the frontal lobes are doing. For us, the frontal lobes make us uniquely human. And I explain this to you now because I'm going to show you some neuroscientific research that looks particularly at the frontal lobes. So let's look at this area of autonomy and some research that was actually done at the National Institute of Mental Health. It's a build slide, but I'm just going to put it all actually on the screen. Remember, we're following the loose agenda now of autonomy, competence, and relatedness as those intrinsic motivators. So looking now at the autonomy. What this experimentation, this research looked at, was when we are conducting a task that is routine, that we know how to actually do it, then we're activating the left-hand side of the brain. The left-hand side of the brain is where we store the rules. It's where we store the rules for shadows, where we store the rules for checkerboards in the optical illusion, where we store the rules for getting out of bed in the morning, where we store the rules for performance management systems, where we store the rules for operating with a different organisation in the business. It's all from a neural perspective. We've trod that path before, so those neural pathways are accessible and open to us. If, however, we are operating on the right-hand side of the, we're doing a new task, a novel task, then what happens is the right-hand side of the brain lights up, and so does the prefrontal cortex. So we're entering the part of the brain that takes us into creativity, innovation, and that area of autonomy. When we're free to do what we want to do, and remember, autonomy is one of the great intrinsic motivators, we're using a different part of our brain. We're using the creative, the innovative part of the brain, the ideas, forward-planning part of the brain. Surely that's what we're wanting to engage with our employees. So the lesson here from a neurological point of view is, don't just stick with routines. Create an environment where people can have autonomous work and that they move into utilizing that creative and different part of the brain.